It began as a hushed conversation behind Kensington Palace walls, one that aides tried to downplay and courtiers quickly silenced. But the look on Princess Catherine's face as she exited that private meeting said everything the palace couldn't. Something was wrong, and it involved Charlotte. What was first dismissed as a rumor soon turned into a royal firestorm, now confirmed by the very people who fought to protect it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. For days, whispers drifted through royal circles with unusual speed. Staff members who normally spoke freely suddenly became cautious. Conversations stopped when certain names were mentioned. Doors remained closed longer than usual. At the center of it all was a private meeting involving Catherine, Prince William, and a small group of senior royal advisors. Officially, nothing significant had happened. Unofficially, the atmosphere surrounding the palace began to change almost overnight. Those who worked closest to the family sensed it first. Something serious had entered the royal household, and the effort to contain it only made the rumors stronger. What raised even more questions was the extraordinary level of secrecy that followed. Palace staff were reportedly instructed not to discuss what had taken place. That alone was enough to spark concern among insiders. The royal family had weathered countless challenges before, but this felt different. This felt personal. As speculation grew, attention quickly turned toward Princess Charlotte. Her name began appearing in private conversations, though never publicly. No explanations were offered. No reassurances were given. Instead, silence became the palace's chosen strategy, and that silence created a vacuum filled with uncertainty. Then came the moment many observers would later point to as the first visible sign that something was deeply troubling Catherine. After the meeting concluded, she emerged looking noticeably shaken. Those familiar with her calm public composure were startled by the change. While no statement followed, the concern on her face lingered in the minds of everyone who saw her. It was not the expression of someone dealing with a routine matter. It was the expression of someone carrying a burden she could not yet share. Later that same evening, attention shifted to Prince William. According to several royal insiders, he was seen spending quiet time with Charlotte, offering comfort in a way that immediately fueled speculation. While the details remained hidden, the image of a protective father standing close to his grave resonated throughout royal circles. Questions multiplied. What had prompted such concern? Why had senior advisors been involved? And why had the palace become so determined to keep everything under wraps? As journalists and commentators searched for answers, another revelation began to emerge. Some insiders claimed the tension had not appeared suddenly at all. According to those familiar with the situation, signs of concern had been building behind the scenes for months. Small details that once seemed insignificant suddenly took on new meaning. Private discussions, unexpected schedule adjustments, and subtle shifts in behavior all appeared connected. Yet perhaps the most surprising development involved King Charles himself. Sources suggested he had become increasingly focused on conversations about the future of the monarchy, speaking more frequently about legacy, continuity, and what would come after him. At first, those discussions seemed unrelated, but as events unfolded, they began to look like pieces of a much larger puzzle. And standing quietly at the edge of that puzzle was Princess Anne, watching, listening, and perhaps understanding far more than anyone realized. But the chilling truth wasn't just about Charlotte's future. It was tied to a final royal vision King Charles had been preparing for years. For years, many believed King Charles was simply managing one crisis after another. But according to palace insiders, he was doing something else entirely, building a blueprint for the monarchy's survival long after he was gone. As questions continued to swirl around the private concerns that had shaken Catherine and drawn Charlotte into an atmosphere of unusual secrecy, attention slowly began to shift toward a much larger story unfolding behind palace walls. The deeper investigators looked, the more they discovered that recent events were not isolated incidents. They were connected to conversations that had been taking place quietly for years. While the public watched King Charles navigate the pressures of the modern monarchy, those closest to him reportedly witnessed something very different. Behind closed doors, the king had become increasingly focused on the future. Not the next month, not the next year, the future of the institution itself. According to royal insiders, Charles's health challenges forced him to confront questions that many monarchs spend a lifetime avoiding. Suddenly, discussions about succession, continuity, and long-term stability became impossible to postpone. Those familiar with the situation claim the king began reviewing plans with renewed urgency, examining not only who would inherit responsibility, but also whether the monarchy itself was prepared for the challenges ahead. This was not a man focused on expanding royal influence or preserving personal prestige. Instead, reports suggest he became preoccupied with protecting something far more fragile: public trust. That concern was growing for a reason. The monarchy had endured turbulent years filled with controversy, division, and relentless public scrutiny. Every disagreement seemed to become a headline. Every challenge became a debate about relevance. Insiders claim Charles understood that the crown's greatest threat was not coming from outside forces, but from the gradual erosion of confidence within the institution itself. The question was no longer whether the monarchy could survive difficult moments. The question was whether future generations would continue believing in its purpose. As these concerns intensified, one figure reportedly became increasingly central to the king's private discussions: Princess Anne. For decades, Anne had earned a reputation for discipline, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to duty. She was not drawn to public drama. She was not interested in palace rivalries. And perhaps for that very reason, Charles came to trust her judgment more than ever. Sources suggest that private meetings between the brother and sister became more frequent, often focusing on issues that extended far beyond day-to-day royal business. They were discussing legacy, responsibility, survival. Some royal observers have even drawn comparisons to the careful planning once associated with Queen Elizabeth II. Throughout her reign, she understood that stability depended on thinking years ahead, rather than reacting to the crisis of the moment. According to those familiar with Charles's thinking, he had begun adopting a similar approach. Quietly, methodically, and without public fanfare, he was reportedly examining how the monarchy could remain relevant in a rapidly changing world. And standing beside him throughout much of that process was Anne, becoming not merely a trusted advisor, but a guardian of conversations few others were allowed to hear. That growing secrecy only fueled speculation. Rumors began circulating about a confidential framework, a long-term vision that outlined Charles's hopes for the future. No official document was ever acknowledged publicly, yet whispers persisted. Some claimed it addressed leadership. Others believed it focused on responsibility and service. What united every version of the story was one striking detail. Very few family members allegedly knew the full scope of what was being discussed. Even senior figures within royal circles were said to possess only fragments of the larger picture. The result was an atmosphere filled with uncertainty. While public attention remained fixed on immediate events, a far more significant transformation was reportedly taking shape in private. Charles appeared determined to prepare the monarchy for challenges that had not yet arrived, and Anne seemed to understand exactly why that mission mattered. The closer she stood to those confidential discussions, the clearer it became that the king was not simply planning for the future. He was trying to define it. And as pieces of that hidden vision slowly began to emerge, one truth became impossible to ignore. Everything that had happened so far was leading toward a single principle that would alter the monarchy forever. And as Anne would later reveal, the king's vision centered on one principle that would reshape every royal relationship. When Princess Anne finally began speaking about what Charles truly wanted, even seasoned royal observers were stunned, because his final wish wasn't about titles, palaces, or personal legacy. It was about saving the institution itself. The more Princess Anne shared about those private discussions, the clearer it became that King Charles had been thinking far beyond the immediate challenges facing the royal family. While many assumed his attention was consumed by daily pressures, constitutional responsibilities, and personal health concerns, insiders suggest his focus had quietly shifted toward something much larger. He was reportedly asking difficult questions about what kind of monarchy would remain when the current generation was gone. Not what would make headlines, not what would satisfy competing interests, but what would endure. According to those familiar with his thinking, Charles had reached a sobering conclusion. The future of the crown would depend not on grandeur, popularity, or tradition alone, but on whether it could adapt without losing its soul. That realization reportedly shaped every conversation he had with Anne. At the center of his vision was the belief that the monarchy needed to become stronger by becoming leaner. For decades, the institution had expanded, evolved, and adjusted to changing times. Yet Charles allegedly feared that complexity itself could become a weakness. Too many competing interests, too many distractions, too many divisions. He wanted an institution defined by purpose rather than size. One driven by service rather than symbolism. The objective was not to diminish the monarchy, but to protect it from pressures that threatened to pull it apart. What made this vision particularly striking was the principle that guided it. According to Anne, Charles repeatedly returned to one idea above all others. Duty must come before personal loyalty. It was a belief that carried enormous consequences, because it challenged assumptions that had shaped royal relationships for years. Family bonds mattered, personal feelings mattered, but when those interests conflicted with the long-term health of the institution, Charles reportedly believed the institution had to come first. It was a difficult philosophy, a painful one. Yet in his view, preserving the crown required choices that could not be made through emotion alone. As these discussions continued, attention increasingly turned toward the next generation. Charles was reportedly less interested in resolving every current dispute than in preparing the monarchy for decades still to come. William and Catherine stood at the center of that vision, not because they were perfect, but because they represented stability at a time when stability had become increasingly valuable. Sources claim Charles saw them as the foundation upon which the future could be built. Reliable, consistent, focused on service, the qualities he believed the public still respected most. Yet the king's thinking extended even further. George, Charlotte, and Louis were not simply grandchildren in his eyes. According to insiders, they represented continuity itself. They symbolized the bridge between today's monarchy and tomorrow's. Their future mattered because the institution's future mattered. Every decision being discussed, every plan being quietly reviewed, seemed connected to a desire to ensure that future generations inherited something stronger than what they'd pocket. Underlying all of this was a concern Anne says Charles never fully escaped. Public confidence. He understood that trust, once lost, could be extraordinarily difficult to recover. The monarchy did not survive because of ceremony alone. It survived because people believed it still served a purpose. That belief had to be protected, nurtured, earned again and again. And according to those closest to him, Charles worried that internal divisions posed one of the greatest threats to that trust. Every conflict carried consequences beyond the individuals involved. Every fracture risked weakening the institution itself. The deeper Anne reflected on those conversations, the more apparent it became that Charles's vision was not merely ambitious. It was deeply unsettling for anyone who preferred the old ways. Because if duty truly came before personal loyalty, then difficult choices were inevitable. Sacrifices would have to be made. Expectations would have to change. And some members of the family would soon discover that the future Charles envisioned demanded far more than they ever expected. But while the vision sounded noble on paper, implementing it would force painful decisions that some family members never saw coming. The moment Charles's long-term vision started taking shape behind palace doors, fault lines that had been hidden for years suddenly became impossible to ignore. What had begun as a private effort to secure the monarchy's future was now creating consequences that reached into every corner of royal life. The principle Charles reportedly embraced, that duty must come before personal loyalty, sounded straightforward when discussed in confidential meetings. In reality, it challenged deeply rooted assumptions, long-standing relationships, and competing visions for what the monarchy should become. As fragments of the king's plans slowly circulated among trusted circles, reactions were anything but uniform. Some viewed the changes as necessary, others saw them as disruptive, and beneath the surface, tensions that had remained dormant for years began to awaken. According to palace insiders, the emergence of Charles's long-term strategy revealed a growing divide between different schools of thought within the institution. On one side, were those who believed the monarchy could only survive through discipline, restraint, and a renewed focus on service. They argued that public trust had become the crown's most valuable asset, and that every decision should strengthen that bond. On the other side were figures who believed the monarchy needed to remain flexible, modern, and responsive to shifting public expectations. While both groups claimed to support the institution, they often disagreed about how its future should be shaped. Those disagreements became increasingly difficult to ignore. As these debates intensified, Princess Anne reportedly grew more protective of the king's objectives. The closer she came to understanding the full scope of his vision, the more determined she became to defend it. For Anne, this was not about winning arguments or securing influence. It was about safeguarding something she believed was larger than any individual family member. Sources suggest she viewed Charles's plans as a serious attempt to strengthen the foundations of the monarchy at a time when uncertainty seemed to be growing from every direction. That belief transformed her from a trusted advisor into one of the most committed guardians of the king's mission. At the same time, Prince William was said to be reaching similar conclusions. While he rarely spoke publicly about internal matters, insiders claim he increasingly aligned himself with the broader principles Charles was advocating: stability, responsibility, long-term thinking. These were not merely abstract ideas. They were becoming a roadmap for the future he would one day inherit. As William quietly moved closer to the king's vision, observers began noticing subtle shifts in the dynamics surrounding key royal discussions. The future king appeared to be preparing not only for leadership, but also for the difficult choices that leadership would require. Behind closed doors, those choices reportedly sparked difficult conversations. Palace insiders described meetings filled with competing priorities, unresolved frustrations, and uncomfortable questions. Issues that had once been set aside for the sake of harmony suddenly returned to the forefront. Old disagreements resurfaced. Differing expectations collided. Personal histories that many assumed had been buried reappeared with surprising force. The deeper officials looked into the monarchy's future, the more they found themselves confronting unresolved tensions from its past. What made the situation even more complicated was the contrast between public appearances and private realities. To the outside world, the institution continued to project unity, continuity, and confidence. Yet insiders suggest a different story was unfolding beneath that carefully maintained image. Growing unease lingered behind conversations. Doubts emerged about priorities. Questions circulated regarding who genuinely supported Charles's vision and who merely tolerated it. The distinction mattered because the king's plans were beginning to demand commitments rather than polite agreement. As uncertainty spread, a more troubling question started to take shape. If the monarchy was preparing for significant change, who would ultimately stand behind that transformation when difficult sacrifices became necessary? The answer was far from clear. Some figures appeared committed, others remained cautious, and a few seemed increasingly uncomfortable with the direction events were taking. For Anne, those warning signs were impossible to dismiss. She had spent enough time observing institutions to recognize the danger of hesitation when decisive action was required. What concerned her most was not opposition itself, but the possibility that precious time was running out. The atmosphere grew heavier with every passing week, until one particular conversation changed everything. What was discussed behind those closed doors has never been fully revealed. Yet those familiar with the aftermath insist it left a profound impression on Anne. For the first time, she reportedly became convinced that Charles's concerns were not theoretical. They were immediate. The future he had been preparing for was approaching faster than anyone expected. And then came a private meeting that convinced Anne the king's vision had become far more urgent than anyone realized. Princess Anne had spent decades avoiding the spotlight, but as circumstances changed, she found herself becoming the unlikely messenger of the king's most important warning. The private meeting that had left Anne so deeply concerned did not immediately become public knowledge. Like many significant moments within the royal household, it remained hidden behind layers of discretion and silence. Yet something had changed. Those closest to the Princess Royal began noticing a new sense of urgency in her actions. For most of her life, Anne had operated in the background, carrying out her duties with remarkable consistency. While others attracted headlines and public fascination, she rarely sought attention. She rarely offered personal opinions. She rarely allowed herself to become the center of a story. But now, according to palace insiders, circumstances were pushing her into a role she had never expected to play. That role was shaped by a reputation she had spent decades earning. Within royal circles, Anne was widely regarded as one of the monarchy's most disciplined and dependable figures. While others navigated controversy, shifting public opinion, and personal battles, she remained focused on service. Her commitment was not directed toward personalities or factions. It was directed toward the institution itself. That distinction had become increasingly important as Charles's concerns about the future intensified. Anne was not protecting individuals. She was protecting an idea, a responsibility, a legacy that stretched far beyond the lives of any single generation. As the king's vision continued to evolve, Anne reportedly became more worried about the stability of the monarchy than ever before. The challenges facing the institution were no longer isolated problems that could be solved, one at a time. They were interconnected pressures, building toward something much larger. Public trust remained fragile. Internal disagreements remained unresolved. Expectations continued to shift. Through it all, Charles appeared determined to prepare for the future, and Anne increasingly felt the weight of helping him carry that burden. It was no longer enough to support the vision privately. She had begun to understand that someone would eventually need to explain why it mattered. That realization drew her and the king into even more frequent discussions. According to those familiar with the situation, their conversations became increasingly focused on continuity, responsibility, and preparation. Charles was reportedly looking beyond immediate challenges and asking difficult questions about what future generations would inherit. Anne listened carefully. Sometimes she agreed. Sometimes she challenged assumptions, but she always understood the seriousness of what was at stake. These were not casual conversations. They were discussions about survival, about ensuring that the institution remained strong enough to endure long after current conflicts had faded into history. As a result, Anne reportedly began taking a more active interest in preparing younger members of the family for greater responsibility. She understood that preserving the monarchy would require more than strategy documents and private plans. It would require people capable of carrying those responsibilities forward. Sources suggest she increasingly emphasized the importance of duty, consistency, and service to those who would one day play central roles in the institution's future. The goal was not to create popularity. The goal was to create resilience. Among insiders, a new description of Anne began to emerge. Many referred to her as the keeper of Charles's confidence. She was the person trusted with concerns that few others fully understood. She carried knowledge that came with enormous responsibility. Every discussion seemed to reinforce the same uncomfortable truth. The vision Charles was trying to protect was larger than any individual member of the royal family, larger than current disputes, larger than temporary victories or defeats. It was about preserving something intended to outlast them all. Yet with every passing month, another realization became harder to ignore. Time was becoming a factor. The urgency Anne sensed was not imaginary. The king's determination appeared to grow stronger, not weaker. There was a feeling that important decisions could no longer be postponed indefinitely. Challenges that once seemed distant were moving closer. Questions that could once wait demanded answers. And the more Anne reflected on everything she had learned, the more convinced she became that Charles was racing against something neither influence nor tradition could control. What Anne revealed next would explain why Charles had become so determined to secure the monarchy's future before it was too late. According to those closest to the discussions, Charles wasn't thinking in years anymore. He was thinking in generations. The deeper Princess Anne looked into the king's plans, the more she realized that his urgency was rooted in a simple but powerful truth. Charles was no longer focused on the immediate storms surrounding the monarchy. He was looking far beyond them. While others debated present controversies, public reactions, and short-term challenges, he was reportedly asking what the institution would look like decades from now. What kind of monarchy would George inherit? What responsibilities would Charlotte and Louis carry? And perhaps most importantly, Would the crown still command the trust and respect necessary to endure? These were not abstract questions. They had become the foundation of everything he was trying to accomplish. According to insiders, Charles had become increasingly convinced that continuity would determine the monarchy's survival. Not continuity in the sense of simply passing titles from one generation to another, but continuity of purpose. He wanted future heirs to understand why the institution existed and what responsibilities came with it. Service, duty, accountability. These values were reportedly at the center of every discussion. The king believed that public support could not be inherited automatically. It had to be earned repeatedly through actions that demonstrated commitment rather than privilege. That belief shaped every aspect of his long-term thinking. At the heart of that vision stood William and Catherine. Sources close to royal circles claim Charles viewed them as essential to the monarchy's next chapter, not because they represented popularity alone, but because they embodied the balance he believed the institution needed: tradition and modernity, stability and adaptability, visibility and restraint. He reportedly saw them as the bridge between an older royal model and the expectations of a changing world. The future would eventually belong to them, and Charles wanted that transition to be as strong and seamless as possible. But his focus extended well beyond the next reign. According to those familiar with his thinking, Charles paid close attention to the gradual preparation of George, Charlotte, and Louis. He understood that responsibility could not simply be handed over overnight. It had to be developed carefully over time. The younger generation needed space to grow, learn, and understand the significance of the roles they might one day inherit. This was not about pressure. It was about preparation. Every generation, in his view, was responsible for strengthening the foundations before passing them forward. At the same time, the king reportedly believed the monarchy needed to become more efficient. Discussions about streamlining operations became increasingly important. The goal was not to diminish the institution, but to ensure that it remained focused on its core purpose. Charles appeared determined to create a model built around meaningful contribution, rather than ceremonial excess. Public trust, he believed, would be strengthened when people saw responsibility being matched by accountability. The monarchy needed to demonstrate value through visible service, rather than relying solely on tradition. Throughout this process, Anne played a critical role. If Charles was focused on the future, Anne often served as the guardian of the past. She carried decades of institutional knowledge, historical perspective, and practical experience. Insiders suggest she became increasingly important in helping ensure that modernization did not come at the expense of identity. Adaptation was necessary. Change was inevitable. But Charles reportedly believed tradition still mattered because it provided continuity in uncertain times. The challenge was finding a way to evolve without losing the principles that gave the monarchy its meaning. That balancing act became one of the defining themes of his vision. He did not want a monarchy trapped by history, nor did he want one disconnected from it. Instead, he envisioned an institution capable of honoring its past while remaining relevant to future generations. Above all else, he wanted the crown to be viewed as a commitment to service rather than a symbol of privilege. It was a vision that demanded patience, discipline, and long-term thinking. Yet beneath all the strategic planning, constitutional discussions, and institutional reforms, there remained something deeply personal, driving the king forward. Yet despite all the planning, one emotional moment would reveal just how personal this mission had become for the king. Behind the strategy papers, private meetings, and constitutional discussions was something far simpler: a grandfather worried about the world he would leave behind. For all the conversations about succession, modernization, and the future of the crown, those closest to King Charles increasingly came to believe that his deepest motivation was far more personal than many realized. Beneath the weight of royal duty, beneath the pressure of leadership, and beneath the constant focus on institutional survival, was a man thinking about the generations who would come after him. According to insiders, Charles was not merely trying to secure a monarchy, he was trying to secure a future. And the more Princess Anne reflected on their private discussions, the more she understood that every plan, every concern, and every difficult decision seemed connected to that single goal. Much of that concern reportedly centered on George, Charlotte, and Louis. To the public, they represented the future of the royal family. To Charles, they appeared to represent something even greater. They were living reminders that every generation inherits both opportunities and burdens from the one before it. Sources familiar with the king's thinking suggest he often spoke about the importance of leaving them a stable foundation rather than a collection of unresolved problems. He understood that uncertainty could weaken institutions just as surely as external threats. If future generations were forced to spend their time repairing damage instead of building upon strength, the monarchy's long-term future could become far more fragile than anyone wished to admit. That belief gave an emotional dimension to many of the discussions Anne witnessed. Throughout his public life, Charles had often been viewed through the lens of responsibility, tradition, and expectation. Yet according to those closest to him, there were moments when a different side emerged. Moments when the king's concerns were not framed as constitutional questions, but as deeply personal reflections. Anne, who had known her brother longer than almost anyone else, reportedly saw flashes of vulnerability that the public rarely witnessed. Not weakness, but honesty. The kind of honesty that appears when someone begins thinking seriously about the legacy they will leave behind. Those conversations frequently led back to Queen Elizabeth II. Her influence remained impossible to ignore. For Charles, she was more than a predecessor. She was the standard against which every decision seemed measured. Anne understood this better than most, because she had spent decades watching her mother navigate extraordinary challenges while maintaining a profound sense of duty. As Charles contemplated the future, reflections on Elizabeth's example reportedly became increasingly common. He admired her steadiness, her patience, her commitment to placing service above personal preference. In many ways, the vision he was trying to create appeared rooted in lessons learned from her reign. At the same time, the emotional weight of leadership had become impossible to overlook. The years had brought challenges few could have predicted. Public scrutiny intensified. Family divisions became global headlines. Expectations evolved rapidly. Through it all, Charles carried responsibilities that extended far beyond himself. According to insiders, he understood that leadership often meant making decisions that would never satisfy everyone. Some choices would create disappointment. Others would provoke criticism. Yet he reportedly believed that duty demanded action, even when the consequences were painful. That understanding led to another realization that Anne says remained central to his thinking. Duty always comes with sacrifice. Every generation of royals must surrender certain freedoms in exchange for responsibility. Every monarch must place the institution ahead of personal comfort. Charles knew this from experience. Anne knew it as well. The future generations he cared so deeply about would eventually learn the same lesson. It was unavoidable. But if those sacrifices served a greater purpose, then they carried meaning. Gradually, a larger truth emerged from all these conversations. The monarchy was never meant to belong to one individual. It was a responsibility passed forward from one generation to the next. Temporary custodians, entrusted with something larger than themselves. That perspective shaped everything Charles hoped to accomplish, and everything Anne was now trying to explain. The future was not simply about preserving tradition. It was about preserving responsibility. And once Anne fully understood that truth, she realized there was one final message at the heart of everything her brother had been trying to achieve. And that realization led directly to the message Anne believes the nation was always meant to hear. In the end, Princess Anne says, the king's final wish was never really about himself. It was about ensuring that the crown remained bigger than any one monarch, any one generation, or any one moment of crisis. As the pieces of the story finally came together, Anne arrived at a conclusion that transformed everything she had witnessed over the previous years. The private meetings, the difficult conversations, the growing urgency, the concern about future generations. None of it had been driven by a desire for personal recognition or historical praise. According to those closest to the discussions, Charles was focused on something far more enduring. He wanted to ensure that the institution he inherited would remain strong enough to be passed forward intact, not merely preserved, but strengthened. Not simply protected from today's challenges, but prepared for tomorrow's uncertainties. That, Anne believed, was the true heart of his final vision. At the center of that vision was continuity. Charles reportedly understood that monarchies survive not because individual leaders are flawless, but because each generation accepts responsibility for something larger than itself. The crown had weathered wars, political upheavals, family crises, and social transformation, because it was designed to outlast the people who temporarily carried it. That perspective shaped the king's thinking more than any personal ambition ever could. He was not asking how history would remember him. He was asking whether future generations would inherit an institution capable of earning trust in a changing world. That belief required a difficult principle. One Anne says Charles never abandoned. Duty had to come before personal ambition. It was a philosophy that demanded sacrifice from everyone involved. Popularity could rise and fall. Public opinion could shift. Personal preferences could change. But duty remained constant. According to insiders, Charles believed that once leaders began placing themselves above the institution, the foundation of the monarchy would begin to weaken. Service was not supposed to be convenient. It was supposed to be meaningful. And meaningful responsibilities often require difficult choices. Throughout these discussions, another theme repeatedly emerged: trust. Charles reportedly viewed public trust as the monarchy's most valuable asset. Without it, titles meant little, ceremonies meant little, traditions meant little. The relationship between the crown and the people depended on confidence that those entrusted with responsibility were acting in the public interest rather than their own. Preserving that confidence became one of the guiding objectives behind everything he hoped to achieve. It was not enough for the monarchy to survive. It needed to deserve survival. Princess Anne embraced that responsibility with the same determination that had defined her entire life. Sources suggest she saw herself as a guardian of the principles Charles was trying to protect, not because she sought influence, but because she understood the stakes. The future of the institution would depend on whether those principles endured after the current generation was gone. Her role was not to control that future. Her role was to help preserve the values capable of guiding it. Much of that responsibility would eventually pass to William and Catherine. Throughout Charles's planning, they reportedly remained central figures in the monarchy's next chapter. They represented continuity, stability, and preparation. Yet beyond them stood another generation waiting quietly in the wings: George, Charlotte, Louis. Their future had become one of the king's greatest concerns because they represented the continuation of a story that began long before any of them were born. They were not simply heirs to privilege. They were future custodians of responsibility. Looking back, Anne reportedly saw lessons hidden within every challenge the monarchy had faced. Difficult years had revealed strengths as well as weaknesses. Crises had exposed vulnerabilities, but also resilience. Through every setback, one truth remained unchanged. Institutions survive when people are willing to place long-term stability above short-term gain. They endure when service matters more than status. They thrive when sacrifice is accepted as the price of stewardship. That understanding ultimately became the message Anne believed her brother wanted future generations to hear. The monarchy's future would not be secured through popularity alone. It would not be guaranteed by history or tradition. Its survival would depend on service, sacrifice, accountability, and stability. Those values would determine whether the institution remained relevant and respected for generations to come. And in Anne's view, that was the legacy Charles hoped to leave behind. Because as Princess Anne finally revealed, King Charles's greatest hope was not to be remembered for what he ruled, but for what he protected, ensuring that the monarchy would endure long after the final chapter of his own reign had been written. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.